Hello, and welcome to the Crowley ISD PLC Curriculum Preview for English 2 Unit 2A. I'm Sharon Graves, Secondary ELAR Curriculum Coordinator, and it's good to be back with you again. I'm enjoying working with you this school year. My goal each 6 weeks is to provide you with a high-yield instructional strategy that you can easily implement in your classroom. Please continue to communicate with me anytime for questions or additional support. Please pause for a moment to review the Unit 2A Local Assessment Blueprint. 12 instructional days will be utilized for Unit 2A beginning October 2nd through October 20th. The local assessment will be available for printing on October 17th and should be assessed on October 21st. Remember to administer the assessments within 3 school days upon completion of the unit. This blueprint is also located on the CTL website. For today's purposes, I will identify a curriculum hotspot and provide comprehension instructional strategies, which includes the SIFT strategy, anchor questions, and Fundamental 5 strategies. I will lead you through an analysis of the cognitive content and context of the readiness standard, provide a seed question for your PLC to focus on learning, complete the content builder in the PLC for Reading PLC for Knowledge and Skill Statement 2.3 and the Supporting Standard 2.3a. And you will analyze the supporting and process standards in the IFD. Materials that you will need for the Unit 2A Analyzing Poetic Structure, taught in the second 6 weeks, is your Unit 2 IFD, the Organizing Instruction using the TEAC Standard Types document, and the PLC for Reading PLC document. For the second 6 weeks, the curriculum preview will target Supporting Standard 2.3a, Analyze the Structure and Graphic Elements in Poetry, and the Knowledge and Skills Statement 2.3, Understand, Make Inferences, and Draw Conclusions about Structure and Elements of Poetry. Based on the heat map displayed, please pause and discuss what conclusions can be drawn about these 2 standards. Now let's look at this question from the 2014 English 2 Star. It assesses Standard 2.3a. This was the only question from 2.3a asked on the EOC, but 2 questions were asked from 2.3 and Figure 19b dual coded. What level of specificity is this question? Please take note that students were asked poetry questions on the English 1 2013 EOC, but not 2014. Consequently, you may have students in your class who still need more scaffolding on this standard. Now that we've identified our hotspot for Unit 2, let's focus on learning by first studying the TEACs and then discussing the 4 essential questions. Locate E2.3 on page 16 and 2.3a on page 17 of your IFD. Please recall our 4 driving questions for every PLC. What do we want our students to learn? How do we know they've learned it? What do we do when they don't? And how do we enrich those students who do learn? To set our purpose for reading and studying our standards, we read with this question in mind. What do we want our students to learn? We want them to learn the standard. Let's review the level of specificity. Still on page 16, there are 3 components to each TEAC and SE, the cognitive, content, and context. For TEAC 2.3, students are asked to understand, make inferences, and draw conclusions. Notice the cognitive level of Bloom's in which students are asked to think. The structure and elements are the content, the what that students are learning, and the context is the how, poetry in which students practice and show their learning. Figure 19b may also be assessed as a readiness or supporting standard with 2.3. The second hotspot, E2.3a, is part of Category 2, Understanding Analysis of Literary Text. It makes up 11 questions of the STAR Blueprint Assessment. Please take a moment to pause the video to look on page 17 of your Unit 2 IFD and review the standard and unit level specificity. What is the verb and the cognitive level of Bloom's? What's the content, the what that students are learning? What's the context, the how in which they will practice and show their learning? Did you notice the level of the verb analyze? The content is the structure and elements, and the context is poetry. Please also note the level of specificity breakdown. According to the standards, what do we want our students to learn? How are you already making the learning relevant and rigorous for your students? How do you know your students have learned? This is our ongoing check for understanding, formative assessment. Do students know and can they demonstrate their learning? As we use the content builder, let's build our plan for learning with this question in mind. Let's review this diagram, which helps illustrate that when planning for instruction, it's vital that concepts be taught in connection with the process standards. Students use processes to acquire and demonstrate understanding. The tools to know process act as a stimulus for students by providing strategies and structures that they use to access learning. In English 1 and 2, Figure 19B is the tools to know process. Figure 19A is the ways to show process. Provides an opportunity for students to demonstrate understanding and communicate an application of their learning. Still looking at Unit 2 on pages 16 and 17 in your IFD, TEK 2.3 and 2.3a, place each SE in the corresponding color-coded organizer. Remember to add Figure 19A and 19B. Please take a moment to review the placement of each TEK. Notice there's only one poetry supporting standard, but the knowledge and skills statement, 2.3, is tested with Figure 19B. Let's revisit question 2. How will we know students have learned? During and after building a plan using what we know about the process standards, we need to plan also with this question in mind. Remember that the supporting standards are the scaffolds of learning. They're the prerequisite skills students may need to begin learning the standard. If students aren't successful at the large concepts or you know they have gaps, this is where you can begin interventions. How are you providing students with time and support? The fourth essential question to focus on is how do we enrich those students who do learn? How do we take their learning and thinking to a higher level? Are you already differentiating your content and processes? Do you vary the text to match their reading level? Do you know their reading level? Do you differentiate the how based on their readiness level? Do you provide deeper levels of reading by just setting more in-depth purposes for those students who already can make those intricate inferences? As a collaborative team, are you aligning your understanding of the standard, the verb, the skill, and the context? Are you agreeing on what students must be able to do to demonstrate mastery? Are you aligning the supporting skills to know where to begin your instruction? Is your team checking for understanding through individual formative assessments to drive future instruction? Do you collect and review your data to make your instructional decisions? And does your team use assessment data to make adjustments to their instructional plans? Okay, let's begin planning. As a review, we will use the PLC for Reading PLC tool. For E2.3 and Figure 19B, poetry is our genre. The text is a lyrical, seemingly humorous type poem, but a narrative poem is added later. The evidence of learning, the levels of thinking, establish a purpose for reading, use background knowledge, make inferences, monitor comprehension, create sensory experiences, and ask various levels of questions are the levels of thinking. The evidences of learning will be evident with a graphic organizer and various types of writing. The learning strategies are close reading and the SIFT strategy. What is SIFT? SIFT is a strategy used with fiction and poetry to help readers explore literary elements and techniques and conveys meaning or the theme. SIFT stands for symbolism, imagery, figurative language, tone, and theme. We want students to annotate, but most times they don't know what's important or what they're even looking for, so SIFT gives them a focus for annotating. We also want students to annotate on their reading passages, but when that's not possible, this handout is an example that students can use to record their SIFT analyses. Bookmarks can also be used to help students prompt their thinking. Although students may begin sifting at the lower levels of Bloom's, analyzing the components and drawing inferences about their purpose in the literary work meets the specificity of the standard. Mr. Payne, Crowley High School English teacher, used the SIFT strategy in his classroom. He began with the familiar passage, Humpty Dumpty, and went through the gradual release process with his students. He explained SIFT and then modeled the strategy with them using Humpty Dumpty. Here's a brief example of his modeling the strategy through guided instruction and questioning.
Obviously, the king feels a lot towards this egg, otherwise he wouldn't have devoted so many of his resources to it, right? So what other symbolism, imagery, or figurative language can we look at? Here is the big part though. What if the fall is not just a fall? What if the fall falls under this? We've already talked about it a little bit. How would you symbolically fall?
Like your lowest and rain.
So we could say fall from grace?
Financially.
What if like the kingdom fell?
Yeah.
He then released the responsibility to his students as they, with their elbow partners, sifted a piece that they had already been working on. This is just the beginning of using SIFT. As SIFT becomes regular practice, students will begin seeing symbolism, imagery, figurative language, tone, and theme naturally in their reading. Thank you, Mr. Payne, for showcasing your students' learning. When you implement this or other strategies in your classroom, please let me know. If you'd like to feature a strategy in a future video, need additional support, or just have questions, I look forward to hearing from you. I appreciate your attention today. Thank you so much.